As dawn breaks across the hills of Judea, the first light of day shines softly on Jerusalem, an ancient, beloved, yet tragic city.
But Jerusalem has been a city of faith, it's been a city of unfaith, it's been a city of peace, and it's been a city of blood all throughout its history.
But why here? What clues can be found beneath its ancient streets? A mosaic floor dating back to the 6th century gives an accurate picture of the city, with one startling omission. The Holy Temple is missing. Why? A stone larger than any used in the Great Pyramids is discovered under the Holy Temple complex. How could builders more than 2,000 years ago possibly have moved it into position?
If we could explain every mystery of Jerusalem, we would still have to ask why this city, what there was about this city that caused all of these explainable things to have happened there and caused this city to be what it was. And I think we'd still have to fall back on the notion that somehow or another it really is a holy city.
It is here that David designed and Solomon built Jerusalem's first holy temple. And it is upon these streets Jesus dragged his cross on the way to his own crucifixion. And it is from this place that Mohammed ascended into the heavens mounted on a great steed. But why here? What magnetic forces of history or faith have made Jerusalem central to the three great Western religions? These are but a few, the mysteries of the Bible. Jerusalem, touched by God, transformed by man, it is the Holy Land of the Western world. A city of spirit, memory, and promise. Perched atop the Judean hills just 30 miles inland from the easternmost shore of the Mediterranean Sea, Jerusalem has always beckoned people of faith.
As a Muslim, Jerusalem means a lot of things for me. We believe that Jerusalem is the place chosen by God. When the Prophet Muhammad flew to the sky in one night, when he came from Mecca to Jerusalem.
The God of the Christians, Jesus, is here. The picture, the story comes alive. Here, we know that Christ lived, sat, walked, ate with his disciples, and carried his cross.
I find living in Jerusalem is very special as a Jew. I feel closer to God here. I wake up in the morning before sunrise and I go to the Western Wall to pray. And there's a specialness there, a spirituality.
It has been called the city of peace, but for Jerusalem, peace has always been elusive. As recently as 1967, a great wall separated the western and eastern parts of the city. Although the wall is now gone, the ancient animosities remain. Jerusalem's ancient streets remain alive to the mysterious promise of its unfolding history.
Jerusalem's location has no strategic and military advantages, nor commercial advantages, nor advantages of natural resources, nor transportation, nor marketing. It has nothing geographical to recommend it at all.
Yet over 3,000 years of biblical history can be found here, and a dozen civilizations have left their mark one upon the other.
This is what the Lord says. I will return to Zion and dwell in Jerusalem. Then Jerusalem will be called a city of truth, and the mountain of the Lord will be called the Holy Mountain. Zechariah 8:3.
The ancients believed Jerusalem to be the center of the earth, the place from which all else emerged.
Now, of course, Jerusalem is nothing like the center of the world, but it shows what a tremendous place this small, obscure, out-of-the-way city began to play in the hearts and minds of human beings, because this was the place that God had chosen. And if God chooses a city, it makes it immediately and forever the center of the world.
Little is known of Jerusalem's earliest history. Fragments of pottery reveal it was an ancient home to Semitic people, possibly the Canaanites, who lived here more than 5,000 years ago. Later Egyptian and Syrian texts tell us Jerusalem's original name was Yura Salam. In the Hebrew Bible, the location of Jerusalem is mentioned in Genesis, when God tells Abraham to go to the region of Moriah, associated in later biblical scripture as Jerusalem's sacred mountain.
Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as an offering on one of the mountains I will show you." Genesis 22:2.
As Isaac lies across the altar and Abraham is about to submit to God's will, an angel calls out to him.
"Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only beloved son." Genesis 22:11.
The location of Abraham's altar upon Mount Moriah will become a sacred place to the great Western religions.
And you might ask yourself, why not build the temple at Sinai? That seems like the holiest mountain in the world. That's the mountain where God gives the Ten Commandments. And I think that the answer is, the tradition believes a place where a human being is willing to sacrifice himself for God is even holier than a place where God speaks. And Moriah is the place where both Abraham and Isaac, in different ways, were willing to sacrifice themselves.
The rush of history through Jerusalem's streets has apparently erased any archaeological evidence which might have been found of Abraham's altar. But the next great moment at Jerusalem would leave ample historical and archaeological evidence. It would come nearly 1,000 years later and would determine the city's fate for the next 3,000 years.
"And I will provide a place for my people Israel, and will plant them so that they can have a place of their own and no longer be disturbed." 2 Samuel 7:10.
It is the year 1000 before the Common Era. David, the newly appointed king of Israel, decides to unite the 12 Hebrew tribes and build his capital in an obscure village called Jerusalem.
It was David's decision not to choose another great city as his capital, but rather to take a neutral city which didn't belong to any of the tribes, which was of no interest to any of the tribes, to make this neutral city his capital.
David assembled all Israel in Jerusalem to bring up the ark of the Lord to the place he had prepared for it. 1 Chronicles 15:3.
The Bible tells us David brings the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. The Holy Ark is housed in a tent while David builds his city. Today, the city of David, the part of ancient Jerusalem which David built, has been located south of what is known as today's Old City of Jerusalem. Archaeologists believe it may have extended some 15 acres along the southern slope of Mount Moriah and may have been home to 2,500 people. Even though the 12 tribes of Israel are united and Israel's power is solidified for the first time, according to the Bible, David is paying too much attention to military matters, and God is displeased.
And God, to punish the Israelites and to punish David, sent a plague upon the people. And David repented of his sins, asked God to put an end to the plague. An angel appeared, and the plague ceased at a precise point, right, on top of this Mount Moriah. And it is at that point that David decided that he would build an altar.
It is here, on a Jerusalem hillside, that David builds his altar, and here that he plans a permanent house for the Ark of the Covenant. However, it would be his son, Solomon, who would build the first holy temple. The temple would stand for nearly 400 years. Small wonder, then, that people still come from all over the world to worship at this spot. But no remnants of Jerusalem's holy temple itself have ever been uncovered, and the mystery of Jerusalem's central role in history still remains. Mysteries of the Bible will be right back.
And God said to Solomon, I have chosen and consecrated this temple so that my name may be there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. 2 Chronicles 7:16.
For me as a Jew, Jerusalem is a house, it's my home.
It's impressive that so many people with different religions live here so close together.
As a Christian, this city gave me inspiration of what it's like to be in peace.
When you come here to pray in Jerusalem is a different experience. It's more concentrated, people take their time.
It's very important place, very holy place for the Muslim.
In 967 BCE, Solomon builds the first holy temple upon Jerusalem's Mount Moriah. The Bible describes the temple in great detail. It is the place of priests and sacrifice, the home of the Israelites' Ark of the Covenant. The temple stands only in memory today as the eternal symbol of a people, a faith, and a city. But at the time of Solomon, the temple was real. And what made this temple so unique to the Hebrew people was not its imported woods and golden inlays, but a windowless room called the Holy of Holies.
The inner sanctum of the temple, the Holy of Holies, where a podium stood on which there should have been a statue of the deity, was empty because in Israelite tradition, Yahweh, the God of Israel, was invisible and could not be represented in terms of an image of any sort. And so the very silence, the very vacancy of the temple itself was perhaps the most obvious statement of the difference of Israelite religion.
The most important site in the temple was the Holy of Holies, which housed the Ark of the Covenant. which people were not allowed to enter, which is why even today, if you go to Israel and you walk up on the Temple Mount, there will be a sign that says, don't enter this place because we don't know exactly where the Holy of Holies was located, and nobody should set foot in that spot.
Besides what the Bible tells us, we know little of Solomon's holy temple. No remains of the temple itself have ever been uncovered. History would come to claim the sacred site of Mount Moriah over and over again. But in 1988, an amazing discovery mysteriously surfaced in a Jerusalem antique shop. It is an urn, possibly used by the temple priests, dating back to the days of Solomon. On it are inscribed the words, belonging to the temple of the Lord, holy to the priests. It is the only ritual object ever found of Jerusalem's first holy temple. Solomon's reign would be brief, his kingdom relatively small, but Jerusalem and the Holy Temple would act as a flashpoint for armies that would come to invade the area time and time again. So what can be known about Jerusalem's magnetism for so many hostile forces?
As birds hovering overhead, so will the Lord of hosts defend Jerusalem. Defending it, he will also deliver it, and passing over it, he will preserve it. Isaiah 31:5.
The first great threat to Jerusalem from a foreign power came several hundred years after the death of David. In the 8th century, before the Common Era, the Assyrian Empire, which had long lay dormant, was on the rise again. Hezekiah was afraid of the Syrians coming to him, and he had reason to be afraid.
The campaign of the Assyrians bears down hard upon the Israelites. City after city falls. Megiddo, Hatzor, Lachish. According to the Assyrian accounts, 46 cities in all.
Hezekiah in Jerusalem knew that he would have to fight for his life. And among the various things he did to fortify Jerusalem against the siege that he knew was coming was to secure the water supply. The spring was outside the city wall, and all the Assyrians had to do was poison the spring or close it off, and the city would have fallen in a fairly short time. So what Hezekiah did was to conceal the spring and bring its waters deep through a channel through the rock inside the city to secure a water supply. In other words, he was preparing for a siege that he knew would certainly come.
In 1838, an American explorer, Dr. Edward Robinson, discovered an ancient tunnel beneath Jerusalem's streets. Incredibly, it runs through 1,700 feet of bedrock, from the spring of Gihon outside Jerusalem's walls to the pool of Siloam inside the city. It matches perfectly the Bible's description of King Hezekiah's tunnel.
Water still flows today and is still used by the women of East Jerusalem for laundry and other purposes. And this was one of the rare cases in which we can connect an actual archaeological monument with a specific text in the Hebrew Bible. We also have an inscription that was found in the southern end of the tunnel and removed in 1880 to Istanbul, where it's still to be seen in the museum today. It's half missing, but the half we have describes how the tunnel was dug. And oddly enough, the engineers began at both ends, one group of them at the pool and the other group far away at the source of the waters near the spring. And they tunneled toward each other blindly through the rock, and according to the inscription, when they were about 5 feet apart, each party could hear the picks of the other party, and they adjusted their course slightly and broke through to each other, and the water began flowing at once by gravity, as it does till today.
Miraculously, Jerusalem survives the Assyrian siege, in part because of Hezekiah's water tunnel, and in part, the Bible tells us, because of divine intervention. An angel descends, spreading a deadly plague throughout the Assyrian army camped outside the city gates. Overnight, the plague takes 185,000 lives, and in great haste, the Assyrians retreat. Jerusalem will survive another 114 years until the next superpower, the Babylonians, roll their battering rams across the Judean hills and attack the city. This time, there would be no miracles for Jerusalem.
Both the Assyrians and the Babylonians were among the most ruthless conquerors of the ancient world. Despite the message of encouragement that some of the prophets tried to give, both Israel and Judah were doomed. There is no way they could possibly have resisted the Assyrians or the Babylonians. The handwriting was on the wall, and it was terribly clear.
The Babylonians lay siege on Jerusalem. The city holds out for months, but in the end, the walls are breached, the temple sacked, and the city set on fire.
The Babylonian destruction of the year 586 before the Common Era has left one of the most moving archaeological finds in the recent history of Jerusalem. Deep under the Jewish quarter, 30 meters down below a building site, Professor Avigad found the Israelite Tower. An 8-meter-tall tower dating from the time of the Kingdom of Judea. At the base of the tower, right there on the ground, Professor Avigad found Babylonian arrowheads, shot at the walls of Jerusalem by the Babylonian soldiers outside. We have direct, hands-on, immediate contact with those terrible days when Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians.
It is the end of the First Holy Temple period.
The pain of that moment in Jewish history is almost unimaginable. Thousands of people went into exile. It was the end of a dream that had gone on now for over 1,000 years.
And so begins the time of the diaspora, the Hebrew exile. But Jerusalem would not be forgotten.
If I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you. If I do not consider Jerusalem my highest glory. Psalm 137:5.
Over the next 400 years, Jerusalem would rise again, slowly and painfully. A new religion was soon to be born here. Would that be Jerusalem's destiny? Or merely a matter of historical coincidence? Mysteries of the Bible will be right back. The last dying light of day falls softly across the hills of Judea. It is now that Jerusalem reveals one of its best-kept secrets. Suddenly its domes and spires, towers and minarets, even the hills and trees take on a pink glow, cast off by the famed Jerusalem stone, unique to this area. It is these very same stones that present us with one of Jerusalem's oldest mysteries.
Nobody knows how they did it. But there are stones on the walls of the temple which weigh 60, 70, and 80 tons each. This is at a time when the largest stone in the pyramids is 15 tons. When Stonehenge in England is 40 tons, the largest stone there. And Herod was regularly building with 60 and 70 tons, and the largest stone in the western wall is an astonishing 430 tons.
It is 37 BCE. Jerusalem is undergoing renewed prosperity. The Romans appoint King Herod the Great as ruler of Judah. While undeniably ruthless, Herod is also admired as a brilliant and prolific builder. The construction of Herod's great holy temple, begun in 20 BCE, atop an already standing but modest temple, would take over 80 years to complete. Its sheer mass and engineering ingenuity astounds scholars today. Just how these massive stones were handled and cut remains a mystery.
One theory is that the stones were cut as cylinders and they were rolled to the spot and then cut to fit. This is a possibility, but frankly, no one really knows yet. One thing one learns when you study archaeology and when you study ancient history is that we think that we are a lot more advanced as compared to ancient people than we are. But in terms of cleverness and the ability to build these gigantic buildings and to move gigantic stones around and so on, these people were truly amazing.
The Second Holy Temple was built by Herod more than 400 years after Solomon's First Holy Temple was destroyed. It is to this temple that a young man would come to overturn the tables of the moneylenders.
Then he entered the temple area and began driving out those who were selling. It is written, he said to them, "My house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." Luke 19:45.
It is the feast of the Passover, close to the end of the life of Jesus, and the beginning of Jerusalem's second great religion.
Jerusalem was particularly holy because Jerusalem was the place where the most central events in the Christian faith had occurred. And in fact, the whole country became the Holy Land. But that concept of the Holy Land does not originate in the earliest days of Christianity. It originates really with this concept of the pilgrimage to the places to pray where the prayers would be more efficacious.
The third station. Here Jesus falls the first time.
These are some of Christianity's most sacred sites that can be found along Jerusalem's ancient streets. Here is the Church of the Agony, where Jesus prayed the night before his crucifixion. Here on the Via Dolorosa, Jesus would take his last torturous steps on the way of the cross. Here, deep inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, is the site, some believe, where Jesus' cross was driven into the rocky hill of Golgotha. And here is the garden tomb, believed by some to be the place of Jesus' resurrection. For 37 years after the death of Jesus, Jerusalem would face the worst destruction of its history, the Jewish revolt against Rome. It marked the end of the Jewish claim on the sacred Temple Mount. Mysteries of the Bible will be right back. Today, the city of Jerusalem remains much as it has been throughout its long history. Troubled, restless, and tense. Ancient devotions to different faiths, all seeming to emanate from one original supreme being, still separate people from each other. But an abiding spirit resides in these old hills and streets that seems to embrace all and exclude none. In the years after Jesus lived and died, Jerusalem becomes a center for the early Christians. It is also a city of revolutionary fervor as Judea grows restless under the strains of its foreign occupiers. In the year 66 CE, Judea rises up against Rome. Soon after, 4 Roman legions led by Titus descend upon the city.
For the Roman Empire, which went from Africa to Europe to Asia, to have a revolution right at the heart where all the 3 continents meet, to have chaos in the middle, the axis of its entire empire, was intolerable.
After a brutal 6-month siege, the Romans put the entire city to the torch. Jerusalem was once again completely destroyed. All that remains of Herod's magnificent Holy Temple is the western wall of its great platform.
It may be that the Romans didn't destroy the western wall because it was just an outer wall of the temple, and it wasn't significant enough for them to destroy. But for the Jews, it was everything. It was the one standing remnant of their glory. And even today, it is the holiest single spot in the Jewish world.
Archaeologists and historians have long hoped to find remains of Jerusalem's terrible destruction. In 1970, digging deep beneath the Jewish quarter, Israeli archaeologist Naaman Avagad comes upon a series of rooms once destroyed by fire.
Buried in ash, ashes from a terrible fire, as the building and all its furniture and all its wood and all its ceilings burnt down, he discovered the remains of a smaller house, which is still there in the Jewish quarter. Inside, he found the bone of a young woman's arm. She had apparently been trapped on a staircase when the building fell in on her. She died there, and we found a piece of her skeleton. Horrible.
Had Jerusalem been able to carry on, had it survived the Roman destruction in 70 of the Common Era, I think that Christianity would have had a quite different character. There would have been a much stronger Judeo-Christian tradition based in Jerusalem, a much stronger and more heavily Jewish version of Christianity.
Jerusalem is now a Roman pagan city with temples to Jupiter and Venus. All Jews are banned from entering the city under pain of death. But 300 years later, Jerusalem transforms again. In 313 of the Common Era, Roman Emperor Constantine stuns the Western world when he converts to Christianity. Overnight, Jerusalem becomes the holy city of the Christian Empire. Prosperity comes to the fallen walls of Jerusalem as pilgrims led by Constantine's mother, Helena, journey to Jerusalem in search of holy places.
So when Constantine's historians and archaeologists said, well, we'd like to build a church over the spot where Jesus was crucified, where was it? Well, the local Christians said, well, it's over there under the Temple of Venus. It's curious how they would have known that, except that perhaps they had passed it along from generation to generation, that knowledge. So he ordered the Temple of Venus to be torn down, and he ordered workmen to come in and dig, and they dug, and sure enough, they found some ancient graves, and they found this outcropping of rock.
300 years after the fact, Emperor Constantine builds the first church of the Holy Sepulchre on this spot. It is now considered by most as the traditional site of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. A remarkable discovery in 1875, found hundreds of miles away from Jerusalem in the ancient city of Madaba, brings us to the next chapter in Jerusalem's history with three great religions. It is a mosaic map dating back to the year 580 CE. It provides a remarkable bird's-eye view of 6th century Jerusalem at the height of its Christian glory. But it is what the Madaba mosaic does not show that provides the mystery. Missing from the mosaic, all the more pronounced by its absence, is what is on the Temple Mount.
If you look at the Madaba map, there should be a place where the Temple Mount would be. If you look in the right place, there should be something there, but there's nothing there that you can put your finger on and say, this is the Temple Mount.
Why? Is it because a third religion would soon come to claim Jerusalem's Temple Mount and build a magnificent shrine on its outcropping of rock? Mysteries of the Bible will be right back.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
It seems a cry as old as time, the muezzin's call of the Muslim faithful. When the call to prayer comes 5 times a day, roughly 1 out of every 6 people on the planet bows down in prayer in the direction of Mecca.
أشهد أن محمد رسول الله.
Yet when the Muslim faithful first began to pray nearly 1,200 years ago, it was not toward Mecca they turned, but toward Jerusalem.
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praise is due to God, the Lord of all the worlds. The most gracious, the most merciful Lord of the last judgment day. You alone do we worship, and unto you alone we turn for your help. The Quran, 1:1.
In 638, Muslim forces riding west from Arabia surround Jerusalem and claim the city as their own. Jerusalem once again is about to take on a central place in a new religion. What was it about Jerusalem that drew the Arabian Bedouin west across the desert sands?
It is a part of the belief for Muslim to believe in all the prophets who came before Muhammad, starting from Adam, because Adam himself is considered a prophet. So from Adam to Muhammad, it is the same thing, monotheism, worshipping the one God.
Perhaps what drew the early Muslims to Mount Moriah is the fact that the Quran holds sacred many of the same people that are found in the Bible. In the Quran, however, when Abraham is called upon to sacrifice his son on Mount Moriah, it is not Isaac he puts on the altar, but another son, Ishmael.
And when he was old enough to work with him, he said, "O my dear son, I have seen in a dream that I am slaughtering thee. So consider what thou thinkest of it." He replied, "O my father, do as thou art commanded. Thou wilt find me, if Allah please, steadfast in my faith." The Quran, 37:102.
Abraham has 2 children, both of whom found a people. Isaac, the Israelites, and Ishmael, the Arab and Islamic peoples. And they have very different histories and very different relationships to the land. But both of them obviously have an almost mystical binding with the land of Israel and Jerusalem in particular.
every Muslim, wherever he may be, in China or whatever, feels a special relation to Jerusalem as he feels or she feels special relation to Mecca and Medina.
Muhammad was born in Mecca in the year 570. It would not be until he was 40 years old that he received a divine revelation. He was called upon to spread the word of the single God, Allah in Arabic, to the Bedouin tribes of Arabia. For Muhammad and his followers, Jerusalem's sacred holy temple would become the Harim Esh Sharif, the noble sanctuary located under the dome of the rock. It is from here, according to Islamic legend, that Muhammad ascended into the heavens.
Glory be to him who carried his servant by night from the holy shrine to the distant shrine, the precincts of which we have blessed, that we might show him some of our miraculous signs. He is the one who hears, the one who sees. The Quran, 17:1.
And so the way the story begins to unfold in the later literature on Muhammad is that he was sleeping outside the Kaaba in Mecca, the large central shrine there, and was taken, perhaps in a dream, perhaps awakened, taken to Jerusalem, touched down at the latest site of the Dome of the Rock, and then was taken from there up through the seventh heaven into the abode of God, where the entire Quran was revealed to him, and then brought back to Mecca.
According to Muslim tradition, it is in the heavens above Jerusalem that Muhammad receives prayer instructions from Allah.
During his contact with God, he got the support and he got the command of God of constant prayers, as the Muslims perform them now 5 times a day.
With Muhammad's mystical journey into the heavens, Jerusalem is transformed once again. It becomes a center of Islamic faith and will remain so for most of the next 1,400 years. Today, Jerusalem is considered Islam's 3rd most holy city. Only the Arabian cities of Mecca and Medina are considered holier.
They will call Jerusalem the throne of the Lord, and all nations will gather in Jerusalem to honor the name of the Lord. Jeremiah 3:17.
Today, Jerusalem, spiritual home to all the children of Abraham, is a city whose past is as complex and rich as the promise of its future.
One of the most remarkable things about Jerusalem is how civilization after civilization is found built one on top of the other in the same city. And the great mystery is, why that city? Why does each civilization build there and then whisper its heritage to the one that follows?
Jerusalem is a city. It represents humanity living together as a group. Jerusalem, unfortunately, is also a symbol of our inability to live together as human beings.
Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls. Psalm 122:6.
Jerusalem is a center of life for Jewish people. It's not only the religious center for the Jews, but it's also the cultural and the national symbol of Jewish people. And without Jerusalem, you couldn't really have a state of Israel.
You can't escape the presence of faith in God. I find Christ on the Via Dolorosa, in the faces of the merchants who come up, and they speak and they resound of the people who would be there, watching when Jesus carried his cross.
Since we pray for one God, we should behave as brothers. It's very important for us as people living in this land, to love each other, and to see Jerusalem as an example of peace, not a place of conflict and fight.